Hi, I'm Ken Heyman. As Managing Director Hi, I'm Ken Heyman. As Managing Director of the Advisor Institute at AllianceBernstein, I meet with financial advisors every day. One thing I hear expressed over and over is their frustration with how much they are juggling. The advisors I talk to are constantly trying to balance competing priorities, from managing client relationships to prospecting for new business, and of course, the tasks of leading their team. This problem of juggling is why we created the AllianceBernstein Digital Coach. This is a proprietary tool that draws on the wisdom of behavioral economics and unique perspectives from the Advisor Institute's practice management experts. In less than 10 minutes with the Digital Coach, you will be able to identify and prioritize the top needs of your practice. And armed with those insights, you will be well on your way to tackling the challenge of limited resources while positioning your business to seize opportunities for growth. Let the Digital Coach guide your journey to success. Visit abfunds.com/go/digital coach. That's abfunds.com/go/digital coach. Hi, and welcome back to Secrets of Successful Advisors with Ken Heyman. I'm Ken Heyman, and we're going to change it up a little bit today. I've invited one of my friends and great colleagues, Cara Grey from Good Morning Freedom, to come back to the podcast and continue the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago. Please join us for what I think will be a very energetic conversation. Today, I have the pleasure in the studio with me to have Cara Grey from Good Morning Freedom. Cara is a consultant working with advisors and others around transitioning in life. Cara, thanks for coming back and continuing the conversation.
Sure, Ken. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I feel like it's going to be a real good one for advisors.
Well, I think so. And I think the first time we spoke, we talked a little bit in general about this idea of transitioning, and the big obvious transition that folks are facing these days is that transition into retirement. So I'd like to go just straight at it with you today, and from our two perspectives, maybe enrich the way advisors think about this transition, because I think for the most part, advisors don't like the transition. It's odd to me, and I know you've seen this in your work close up many more times than I have, but it's odd to me that you start out in work like a financial advisor, you build this practice, you build this business. It's hard. You look forward to those vacations, and you look forward to at some point in the future that, crossing that finish line and entering into retirement, and you go through that for years, and then you start getting to that point in life where it's time to retire, and all of a sudden we start seeing reluctances and resistances. And I know you run into this a lot, even in terms of engaging advisors to help them with that process. One of the resistances I've heard a lot, and maybe you could speak to us, maybe we just grapple with a few of these together. One of the resistance I've heard is advisors saying, look, this is my identity. After 30 or 40 years of doing this work, it's who I am. And the idea of retiring actually means kind of abandoning who I am in the world. And I don't want to do it. I want to continue being this thing and having the experience of being this thing. I know you've heard something like that, maybe in your own words, but what's going on there and what do you do with that?
Yes, that is one of the most common things that I hear when I'm working with advisors. When your work has been your purpose, your community, your status, it makes perfect sense that stepping away from it feels like you're losing a part of yourself. But I think here's the truth. Identity doesn't disappear. It evolves. So the question isn't who will I be in this role? Who am I without this role? It's who am I becoming next? And that is what I focus on with clients. When I'm coaching clients, we start exploring parts of them that existed long before they were an advisor, or maybe things that they've always been curious about. Might be leadership, might be some kind of creativity that they haven't explored, maybe some form of generosity that they haven't explored. And then we build from there, because the goal isn't to replace your identity, it's to expand it.
Well, that is a great starting point for this conversation because you use the term evolve and then you concluded by saying the word expand. And I think that's so energizing and refreshing relative to the experience of, oh my goodness, as I end this role as an advisor, I stop being somebody. What you're saying is essentially, look, that is something you've been. And there's other things that you could evolve into and be in the world. And this transition into retirement, then you're couching it as an opportunity to expand, to develop, to evolve, to emerge. And that actually should, or at least could be, really exciting and energizing to someone. What it also sounds like you're doing is you're giving them a bridge into that exploration so that they're not just jumping off a cliff into the great unknown, but actually thoughtfully building something, maybe even starting well before they actually pull the trigger in retirement. I assume a lot of your consultations start while that person is thoroughly ensconced in their existing identity and then bridge into the next thing over the course of months or maybe even a couple of years.
That's right.
A
Yeah.
vision of how it would look typically in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's best to start planning this next stage of your life while you're still in your current stage, because then the work on the identity, and even things like community and relationships, those things can start to evolve as you're still in your current role, which makes the transition a lot easier. And it might even accelerate the transition, to be honest, if you discover something that you're excited about, that you want to explore, that you don't have time for with your current role, that can even accelerate your goals and things that you're doing in life in general.
So again, it's you bring this very positive energy to this conversation, Kara. That you sound excited about it. You sound like there's reason to be excited about it. I'm guessing you've seen a lot of people kind of evolve in maybe even a surprising way that they hadn't anticipated because of this intentional kind of work, starting when you're comfortable and then bridging off into the next layer. You laughed there for a minute, this idea of evolving in a surprising way. It sounds like that tickled some recollection of yours of some work you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I work with clients who maybe are a bit reluctant to do this kind of work, but yet something deep inside them tells them it's a good thing to do. So they get in touch with me and we start working together. It doesn't take long at all before I see a light bulb go on with every single client and they get excited about something in the future that they haven't considered at all. And that's what my job really is to get them thinking about all the possibilities that could happen in their life because, retirement these days, it could be another 20, 30, 40 years. We're living forever these days. I just think it's an incredible opportunity and exciting. That is why I light up about it because I love this work. I love seeing that light bulb moment, especially for folks that are resistant to this type of work.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting to me because so many financial advisors are very financially successful. So
Yes.
they have the resources to author this next stage of life intentionally and energetically. I mean, it's not something they have to limp into. They could plunge into it with that enthusiasm. But I think the real challenge for them is they need some help creating a vision because the vision of becoming an advisor was so compelling. They need something equally compelling. Now, something you said just struck a nerve for me. As we record this podcast, my father is 5 weeks away from turning 102.
Oh my goodness.
My
So the longevity
a long
conversation,
time,
right?
right. So my father retired at age 65 as a mechanical engineer and has now spent more time in retirement than he spent in actual engineering. He had fought in World War II, so he kind of got started late to his college, and then he was an engineer, retired at age 65. He spent more time in retirement than in his first career. And what you're suggesting here is if you have these resources and you have this intellectual capacity and you have this big chunk of time, to approach it with that sense of enthusiasm about what the next thing could be makes that whole process look a lot more attractive and a lot more energizing. As opposed to, and I'm thinking about a case I worked on some years ago, was an older advisor had partnered with a younger advisor, and they had been in a partnership for over a dozen years. And the partnership originally had been constructed to last 5 years, and then that person was going to exit. And this partnership is now 12 years. And so they're 7 years beyond exiting. And the older partner is still saying, well, I think I'm going to go another 3 years. I think I'm going to
Mhm.
go another 3 years, to the point where the junior partner was now extremely frustrated, to the point of wanting to dissolve the relationship, which is why they called me in.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with the older advisor and listening to them kind of hem and haw about the whole issue of retirement. I finally said to them, I think when you think of retirement, you think of gray emptiness stretching out forever in front of you with everything about your life that mattered in your past. And the only thing looming before you is the end of your life. And
Yeah.
this person literally burst into tears and said to me, yes, that's exactly how I feel. What we're talking about right now, Cara, you're coming at this from a completely different state of mind in terms of your positive enthusiasm in your ability to help somebody create a vision of the future. Can you say a
Yeah.
little bit about that process of helping somebody create a vision of the future that's worth stepping into?
Yeah. So what you're just talking about, the example that you gave is like classic moving target. I see that a lot too, where they say, I'll retire in 3 to 5 years, and that's the same answer for the next every time you see them for the next 3 years, for example. Oh, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. And that's usually because they haven't defined what comes next. So part of the work that I do is helping them define what that is. And I like to paint a really vivid picture. What does your first Monday look like when you retire? To make it really real and concrete, like what do you want your day to look like? What do you want your weeks to look like? How do you want to spend your time? And most people can't describe it. And that's the work. That's what we get into. And once they can, the timeline becomes real and they get excited about, something concrete. So making it, real in terms of like really thinking about like, gosh, if I can do anything, what is that? What time do I want to get up? What time do I want to have lunch? What do I want my day to look like? How much time do I want to be doing something purposeful? How much time do I want in relaxation? How much time do I want to travel? How much time do I want to spend developing new relationships and community? And what could that look like? And what about, giving back or mentoring? Like there's so many things that can be done in our lives, but it's making it concrete. And once they grasp what that could look like in their lives, then it becomes exciting.
It occurs to me as you say that I remember years ago when I was building my consulting practice as a psychotherapist. This is long before I started working in financial services, but I built a practice in psychotherapy that fit my natural tendencies. And one of my tendencies is I need movement. So, unlike many of my colleagues who had a single office that they would go in the morning and they would sit down with their clients all day long, and then at the end of the day, they'd leave and go home. I had four offices. And on any given day, I would go from my morning office to my afternoon office and then from there home. Why? Because I needed movement. And then as I transitioned into consulting in the financial services industry, what was the characteristic of my consultancy? I am flying everywhere around. I'm moving from place to place. I'm going from office to office. That's something I need. I know colleagues of mine back in the day when I was a psychotherapist, that would have been for them a nightmare. So, what you're talking about here, I think, is really interesting because what you're implying is we're going to start with you and what you would find to be your natural habitat as a
Right.
human being, and then build from there the life that fits you best. And I think that's somewhat daunting for folks. I think they really need your help with that.
Yeah,
And
it's
it
completely
sounds
get
like
it.
your help has a lot to do with, well, just being patient and inviting them to explore a little bit more, explore a little bit more. It feels like there's a dialogue that goes on that way in your consulting.
There is. There is homework involved in my work. This does take some sort of deep reflection to plan what you want the next stage of your life to look like. It's a big deal. So my clients do some homework, and then frankly, we go over the homework in session and then we go deeper. I interrogate a little bit more like, what can this really look like? I like, what about this? What have you thought about? So it's really about helping them kind of brainstorm. It becomes like a whiteboard session, and helping them brainstorm what it can really and truly look like to design their life.
It's really a business consultation you're doing. It's a
Yeah.
creativity exercise, it's a business consultation. What occurs to me as I think about having referred clients to you and
Mhm.
the kinds of issues that those clients have brought up to me that I've suggested that they need to address is there's a sense of intentionality and a very businesslike sense of this, and there is some work involved. Unlike in most cases where people kind of show up and, they're in the middle of their life and they have an opportunity to join an advisory practice and they kind of learn how to do the work of being a financial advisor. This is metaphorically handing them a big blank canvas and a whole bunch of paints and saying, hey, let's start somewhere and start pushing back and forth ideas and start throwing some color up there and let's begin to see what emerges. You're really giving them permission to create a life that is an expression of themselves and their value system in some way. I'm guessing for a lot of people, that's hard to give themselves permission to really explore that kind of openly about it's self-indulgent.
Yeah.
It forces them to look at themselves more critically. I'm guessing some folks find that difficult to do, to kind of get into that flow with you.
They do. But one thing I've been told over and over again that I'm very good at meeting people where they're at. I've had a lot of life experience myself, especially with senior executives, senior folks, and just kind of getting a sense of what's going to break through with them. All of my work is very custom. No two clients are the same, no two people are the same. So I very much customize my work so that so that we get where they need to go. We start where they need to start and we get them to where they need to go in order to plan the rest of their lives.
So, what begins to emerge again out of this thing is that this is really an act of self indulgence and self care. It's
It is.
It's
Yeah.
not I'm going to fit you into some simple program. It's very much you journeying with them through that process. And I'm reminded, one of my favorite metaphors, most people who are my age know the name Kit Carson from the history of the Wild Wild West back in the 1800s. Kit Carson was a guide on the Oregon Trail, helping wagon trains get across this rough terrain, this rough, topography, and successfully get to this destination where they were headed. And he actually became famous for how successful he was in helping people navigate through these challenging times. And that really seems to me to capture the essence of what you're talking about. Hey, I've gone down this pathway before with many other people. There's some things to know about doing this that I can help you with, and I can kind of hold you into the process, but it's very much going to be your process, not somebody else's process. So it's
That's
kind of a
right.
best of both worlds in that regard. Well, let's take another look. Here's a tricky one. I've heard this a lot. I know you've heard this a lot. So somebody kind of comes and kicks the tires with you and says, well, it seems daunting. I'm a little intimidated by that. Besides, when I retire, I'm just going to do the things I enjoy. I don't need any help figuring out how to do things I enjoy. It seems to me that there's something missing in that mindset that you are addressing and replacing or enriching, expanding on. But I think there's something there that maybe trips up some folks when they think about moving in this direction. Could you speak to that a little bit? I know I've heard that a few times.
I have heard that a few times. When someone says that, I would say, as an advisor, you have spent your career helping people plan their futures. So why wouldn't you take that level of care for yourself? Just what we were talking about. It is completely self care. And, it's not about just doing what's fun. You think retirement is going to be like, golf every day and whatever, but it's really about designing what you want the rhythm of your days to feel like. And also to identify what's going to feel meaningful, because that's the missing piece that people, they think they're going to golf, they think they're going to, whatever, have fun with their friends, join a Margaritaville community, like everything's fine. But having meaning in your life and, figuring out what that is, I think is a big key to it. So, I hear them when they say, I don't need help planning for that, but I would guess that they probably do. And, they have helped their clients plan. So I think that the same thing needs to happen in their lives.
I think the advisors that help their clients plan for retirement in a way that adds and focuses on the meaning of their life, they get this and they're going to be doing some of that work themselves as they approach it, as when they come to grips with approaching it. I think
Yeah.
advisors who see having wealth as being mostly about self-indulgence and acquiring things and acquiring experiences will have more difficulty with it. But I think you're putting your finger on something from a psychological perspective that I would absolutely endorse, and that is a life without meaning, without purpose, is not the natural habitat for the human being. In fact, if you think about what causes human beings to get sick over time, it's being sedentary, being not in motion, being not about things that are challenging. I mean, our body is designed to lift weights and to meet challenges. And I would go so far as to say, and I'm guessing you would tend to agree with me, in fact, I know you do because I know you well enough, that the natural habitat for the human being is actually engaged with others about something larger than themselves that they really believe in and feel strongly about, that allows them to express their talents and their energy, actually to the point where from time to time they get tired and they need a break or a vacation. And I think what I watched in my dad in the stages as he figured this out for himself, he got very involved in Habitat for Humanity. And he happened to want to do something philanthropic. I don't think everyone has to.
No.
But it was part of it was that there was this cadence that fit him better than getting up every morning, driving the car at 8:30 in the morning to get to work by 9, to come home at 5 and, do the projects at work. It was very much more elective how he spent his time. But he was involved in something that mattered to him, that connected him with others, and that required him to put effort in and to use his brain and to use his body. In fact, he was in his mid 90s when he finally said, "You know what? I really shouldn't be on these job sites anymore. My legs are not what they used to be. I need a little help with a cane and I need to not do that anymore." And again, he had to evolve into the next thing at that point, which he's done several times over these 37 years since he retired. But you're making a case here for great intentionality, a significant amount of effort, but also the need for an external guide to help. And maybe talk a little bit about how your relationship and the guidance as well as the intentionality kind of work together on the part of your clients.
Yeah, so my big line is to talk about, how if you've, done well in your career, which these advisors have, what an incredible opportunity and privilege it is to be able to truly design and live the rest of your life. I just think it's incredible. And I think that a lot of people miss it. I saw both of my parents miss that opportunity and not really thrive in their older years. And even for me personally, like part of the reason that I do this work is because I want to thrive personally as I get older. But it does take a tremendous amount of thoughtfulness to do that. It has to be intentional. I don't see a way around it. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of coast through life. 1 year goes by, the next year goes by, and then, what is the meaning? Whereas human beings, we can have so much impact in this world, even as we get older. I mean, I just was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal last week talking about how the new entrepreneur age is 70 to 79. No joke. Think about starting a whole new business. You can do that. And wouldn't that be exciting to learn something totally new, maybe in a totally new space? Because money isn't the object anymore. You've made your money. So if it's not something philanthropic, maybe it's something, what do I want to say? Like making money, like
The entrepreneurial,
commercial.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks, well, it has to be philanthropic. I don't think that's
No.
wrong. It can be whatever you'd like it to be. So let's settle in on this as our last point and what you just brought up. And I want to throw one more at you and let's talk about it a little bit because I think this one's the big one that we don't want to ignore. So the advisor who says, look, I feel like if I retire, I'm just going to shrivel up and die. And of course, advisors have seen that. People have worked, and then they retire, and the next thing you know, they pass away. Or the advisor who says, I want to die at my desk. I hate the thought of retirement. I just want to keep going as if nothing's going to change. And then one day, as has happened, I actually know someone who died at their desk in the office. And there was this sense of, the person died doing what they love to do. I think it begs the question whether they were doing it well the last several years they were doing it.
Yeah.
And the obligation we have to our clients to be thoughtful about it's not just I enjoy doing this, but I'm also doing it well on behalf of these folks. But speak a little bit about that, and I have some thoughts about it as well. Let's see if maybe we can really address this and maybe shatter some of the illusions that advisors have about, well, just keep going and going. And, I won't even worry about it. I'll just keep doing the same old for a long, long time.
So I think it's important to validate the fact that purpose and health are deeply connected, and it's true. But then I think it's important to think about shifting of a fear of dying to a desire to live well. And I'll ask something like, what makes you feel most alive right now? What is it in your work that's making you feel alive? Are there those things? Maybe other things make them feel alive that are outside of their work. Maybe the thought of like teaching or building something, entrepreneurship, mentoring, creating, learning a musical instrument, like learning something, learning how to paint. Once they see that, then we can design a life without being tethered to the office. But what I'll say is about wanting to die at your desk, when I hear that, it tells me that this person really loves what they do. And I think of a lot of advisors really do love what they do. And that's great. So maybe the goal in retirement isn't to retire from the work, but maybe to edit it. And so I approach it in that way too. Like, maybe they can scale back, shift roles, do consulting, do some mentoring, or take on some passion projects. There's a big difference between stopping work and reshaping it. So that's an opportunity as well. And then I also really, on this subject, I like to ask my clients, what energizes them and what could they let go of, and start talking about those types of things in conversation. And that's often, a little bit softer path to landing on retirement. And again, they might discover things along the way that are really exciting that then accelerates their retirement. It doesn't always happen, but I think really thinking about energy, even looking at your calendar. I have my clients look at their calendar for a week and tell me, like, does this meeting energize you? Does this meeting energize you? Does this dinner with your wife energize you? Does this time with your grandkids energize you? Like, what are the things that really light you up? And then iterate from there.
Well, you talk about editing, and that's a really interesting thing. It's not, you don't have to necessarily start in whole cloth, all brand new. You can take where you're at and edit it, change some of those terms. From my side of it as a psychologist, I would say the advisor who says I want to die at my desk is basically failing in their evolution as a person. They're avoiding the challenge of the next step. They're casting it all as a negative. It's like, work, 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 die, as opposed to work hard, succeed, and then have the freedom to choose and to author the next phase. The other thing I say to advisors, because it is part of it, is that eventually you're going to be at the point where you're not doing your best work, that distractions will be occurring, health issues will be occurring, energy issues will be occurring, the speed of change in the marketplace will be occurring. And I want for advisors, and I say this in a lot of my lectures, I want you to end as well as you began. When you began in the business, you built a business. It took time, effort, energy, risk, passion. It was hard work. And when you built your business and you ran your business, it was energy, passion, hard work, that meaningfulness, and that was all rewarded, all those efforts. What I want for advisors is to embrace the same idea, and what you're offering them is a pathway to do this. And that is, I need to end as well as I began. So I need to end while I'm still doing great work, while I'm still honoring the commitment I have to my clients, and honoring a commitment to myself that I'm going to be given this period of time, and I can do something with it if I have the will to do it. And I remind folks, look, once upon a time, you were very successful in high school and then you had to graduate. Then you went off to college and then you were very successful in college and then you had to graduate. And in every stage of life, you had to, you raised your kids and then they all graduated and left home. And in each case, this stuff happened somewhat to you, right? In this case, this is something you can initiate, you can author, you can define. And what you're offering, Cara, is the opportunity for folks to do it with great intention and to end their career as well as they begin it. So, Cara, give us a quick introduction. How do we find you? How do folks reach out to you? And let's end on that positive note and encourage folks to do so.
Sure, I appreciate that, Ken. So you can find me at goodmorningfreedom.com. Like literally everything about me, all of my podcast interviews, everything I think about, all about me and my work is there. Again, goodmorningfreedom.com.
Cara, thanks so much for taking the time today to be on the podcast, Secrets of Successful Advisors with Ken Heyman. And as Ken Heyman, I just want to say it's such a great opportunity to talk with you, talking about things that we don't always talk about, or maybe aren't even comfortable talking about. But goodmorningfreedom.com, Cara Grey, thanks for taking the time today. This has been a tremendously energetic and energizing conversation.